Now, do you see that if you're not drinking more water, but you're drinking more soda, that now you have cut the formula down in half to produce peroxide, which is water and oxygen to produce peroxide? Let's say instead of nice cool air, you smoke a cigarette. Now you're cutting down on the amount of oxygen, which is the second half of the formula to produce peroxide. So what happens? Instead of producing peroxide, the person who smokes, drinks too much soda or other substances, does not produce enough peroxide to defend against bacteria and viruses that invade the lungs, and so the only resort for the body to get out what it should not keep in is called a cough. Does everybody see this? Now, it doesn't mean, I know how you church people are. I did not say that everybody who coughs is not drinking enough water or breathing air. I don't want y'all running around accusing people of smoking and drinking Coca-Cola because they're coughing. That's not what I said. But I want you to understand why anybody who smokes any substance, cigarettes, marijuana, cigars, vaping, will develop a cough. Because you're debilitating your body's ability to produce peroxide and fight off bad organisms. So the other part of this formula is chlorine. Now, any of you wash clothes? Yes. Right. If you want to get your white clothes pearly white, what do you have to add to the wash? Chlorine, bleach. The reason why is bleach will get out any stain. Well, guess what? In your lungs, when you drink enough water, when you breathe enough air, not only do you produce peroxide, but you produce a form of bleach, and these cells right here called the neutrophil are the ones that fight off the real nasty organisms because they produce a bleach that kills bacteria and viruses. This occurs in your lungs when you get enough oxygen and water. So, why is it that we warn about smoking and drinking other substances that should not be in your body? Because ultimately, folks, here's what you need to understand about your lungs. They're your second line of defense. If a bacteria, if a virus gets past your first line of defense, the next line of defense before it goes to the rest of your body is the lungs. Now, anybody heard of cancer? Yes. Anybody heard of pneumonia? Yes. Huh? Anybody even heard of type 1 diabetes? Yes. Anyone heard of type 2 diabetes? Yes. Okay? All of these illnesses, one of the triggers are bacterial and viral illnesses. Now think about what I'm saying. Your lungs are your first defense or second defense? Second defense. So if a bacteria or virus gets past your skin, gets past the snot produced in your nose, gets past your saliva, your next defense to keep them out are your lungs, which need what two things to produce peroxide? What's the first one? And what's the second one? To produce peroxide. Is everybody seeing why it's important now to get a healthy daily dose of water and clean air? Why is it that our children are getting sicker and sicker during the winter months? Because they're not drinking enough water, they're not getting enough air and oxygen, so they're not producing enough peroxide, H2O2. And therefore they can't defend against those organisms and mechanisms. Now I want to show you how the cough of a smoker, instead of scar face, produces scar lung. Okay? Let's explain the smoker's cough, and this is why it's important that we as a church need to have a stop smoking program. Can I let you in on a little secret? about 5% of your members are active smokers. You just don't know it. Now, I'm not judging anybody, but here's what I'm trying to tell you. Whatever illness and sin and disease is going outside of the house of God is happening inside the house of God. You just don't know it. The reason why this is important is for us to recognize that our purpose in this earth is to help those in the house and those outside the house. And one of the things that goes under the radar is this addiction to smoking cigarettes. You know, let me tell you how you know. You ever, you have breath mints, but then you have atomic-like breath mints. You ever been around that person that the breath mint is so strong that it can provoke asthma attacks? I mean, they breathing okay, but everybody else is coughing. That's typically a sign that that person is an under-the-radar smoker. And they're trying to come in the house of God and hide what they're doing 6 days a week. If you see a person that gets up every 15 minutes and goes outside, can't find them hiding in a corner, they're an undercover smoker. Now, number one, we need to bring back stop smoking programs. If you want to have a ministry that's effective in your community, we need to let people understand the reason why it's to their benefit that they stop smoking. Because when you don't get enough oxygen, even if you get enough water, you're not producing enough peroxide, and therefore you can't defend against the organisms that start type 2 diabetes, that can start a cancer, that can start any form of disease once that organism gets past the second line of defense. Is it making sense? Yeah. Now let's look at the smoker's cough explained. In your lungs, now I'm going to have you guys do something. In your bronchioles, which are like a tube, you have what we call pseudostratified ciliated epithelium. Now you know it wasn't a brother that gave this a name. Brother be like, man, I'm getting short of breath pronouncing this thing. So let me explain to you what that means. Everybody take your two hands and put them next to each other. And wiggle your hands like this. Okay? Wiggle your hands like this. Okay? Good. Now, let me tell you what that simulates. You can stop that now. I see some of you are having a lot of fun. You all need to get out more. There's lots of other toys to play with. What that simulates is your body is always moving these things called cilia to move stuff out of your lungs that do not belong there. So when you have natural lungs, when you are breathing oxygen, when you are drinking water, the body, the cilia, are moving stuff out that you typically spit out or cough out. Okay? But when a person starts to smoke, those cilia become smooth and become like skin. Now, instead of those cilia moving up, they stop moving and become smooth. So all the stuff that the lungs can typically move out now become trapped in. And that is what produces the smoker's cough. It sounds like a car trying to start the engine in the morning. Thank you. Now, have you guys ever heard a car that's not been started for a long time? Here's a car that you start that, the battery might be a little bit. Engine runs. But then the car that has a problem start for a long time, it winds up and winds up and winds up. So the smoker's cough is one that has a low gurgle type sound. Now, let me tell you why that's important. When a smoker starts to develop a cough, and that lung tissue starts to change, listen to me very carefully. That is the first stage of cancer. Anywhere in your body where it's exposed to something that it's not used to, the skin type starts to change to skin, a different type of epithelium, and that's what we call the first stage of cancer. It's something we call metaplasia. So instead of your lungs having that cilia that moves stuff out, it becomes smooth and things get trapped in. This is what we call bronchitis. And these are all of the diseases that smokers can get. Now, folks, let me warn you about smoking marijuana and vapes, any type of smoke that goes into the body. By the way, there's a little thing called cars and exhaust, and there's a governmental agency that would like to remove all of the smog requirements on cars because it's so expensive. If you start inhaling full-fledged, unadulterated, undiminuted smog, it's just as if you are smoking cigarettes. And so what happens is, look at all of the cancers that can be produced by any type of smoke. Here is the one that we're starting to find with marijuana smoking, two types: pancreatic cancer and mental issues. I consider mental disease a cancer. It acts like just like it. The problem with marijuana is it affects the dopamine levels and production in your brain. So look at this. Look at this. Marijuana has a double whammy. It more affects the brain than cigarettes, but it has the same effect on the rest of the body as starting a cancerous process. Because if you don't get enough oxygen, if you don't get enough water, you're not producing peroxide, which the lungs are the second line of defense to bacteria and viruses, and once they start entering your body unopposed without a barrier, they start changing the glands and the skin, and you are privy to any one of these cancers. Cancer of the throat, cancer of the mouth, lung cancer, peptic ulcer, pancreatic cancer, bladder cancer, arterial sclerosis, and myocardial infarction. And the reason why I have a nice young man up here is because this is not a disease of the elderly. When you're younger and you smoke, your glands are more prone to change into something else. And that is the beginning of cancergenesis. This is why, as a church, we have a prohibition of you putting substances in your body that are just about to harm you. God is not judging you. He's trying to save you. And this should be one of our campaigns. Number one, our children that don't drink enough water, that become addicted to caffeinated drinks or sugar-filled drinks, are not producing enough peroxide, and the evidence is, how many of you are privy to children being sent home from daycare more than they used to be because they have a cough? And a lot of times it has to do with somebody in the house smokes, or that child throws a tantrum when you try to make them drink more water. But do you see the importance of drinking water and breathing clean air? Yes. Because you need that peroxide. Not only to defend against upper respiratory infections, but to defend against cancer. Here is also evidence that this world is not our home. Whether you know it or not, you're smoking every day. The pollutants that we have thrown into the environment with the greenhouse gas effect, it is only by the grace of God that more of us don't have cancer. Because when you start to smoke, when you don't get enough clean air, and talk about our water supply, it's polluted. How many of you are brave enough, braver than Samson, to drink tap water? Not me. Right? You better buy the bottled stuff, and even that is questionable. But do you see the importance now? It's not just drink water, breathe clean air. It's vital to your survival. And it's vital to us as adults, it's vital to our kids, but also it's vital to our community. Right now, the people, the ones that are smoking more marijuana than everybody else are people of color. Because they've been fed a lie. It's safe. It won't harm you. I don't smoke cigarettes. I smoke the same formula, same results. not producing enough peroxide, and when you start to develop that cough, it's the first sign of cancer. Let's go through some oxymorons, I found this interesting, that have to do with upper respiratory infections, because during the winter months, many people, am I in the right spot for the camera? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, they'll just see my forehead. Well, you know, it's big enough, so all right. Some oxymorons, clearly misunderstood. Naturally, you're pretty ugly. There's some oxymorons I want to go through with upper respiratory infections so that we clear up this thing about what needs antibiotics and what doesn't. By the way, most upper respiratory infections don't need antibiotics. And if you exercise on a regular basis and start passing a lot more oxygen to your lungs, this is why people who are active don't become as sick as people who are sedentary, because you're not passing enough oxygen. You're not drinking it. You may be drinking enough water, but you're not producing the maximum amount of peroxide. So, oxymorons and coughs. Here's oxymoron number one. Doc, you know what? The reason why I came to see you is last year I had a bad cough. I went to the hospital and they told me I had walking pneumonia. Ladies and gentlemen, walking pneumonia is a fancy way to make you think the $3,000 that they're billing your insurance was worth it. Walking pneumonia just means an extended cold. Wow. Walking means that you can walk. Pneumonia just means bad air. The difference between walking pneumonia versus the true pneumonia is this is pneumonia. As you can see, this is a lung that cannot pass as much oxygen as it should because a secondary reason has produced a bacterial infection. The number one reason for bacterial infections are long hospitalizations. And that's why I tell people, consult with doctors that you know to know how long your loved one should or should not be in the hospital. Some of our loved ones stay in the hospital too long and are actually more prone to getting pneumonia because they got it in the hospital. But you know why they don't tell you that? Because we have some people called lawyers. And they make a lot of money off of medical malpractice. I'm not saying lawyers are bad people. I know we got one in the house, so I must be careful. But I want you to understand this. The reason why I'm giving you this information is pneumonia comes as a secondary infection from something else that was going on. But at the same time, you have to be careful of when your loved ones are institutionalized because the hospital is the number one source for typical pneumonia infections. And it has nothing to do with them not being clean. It has to do with the fact that here's what you need to make sure, that they're moving your loved ones as much as they say their joints hurt and I can't do it. You want to get them oxygenating, not just breathing oxygen from the machine, but you actually want those people that are making $5,000 a day from your loved one being in the hospital. You take those 10 minutes and you walk my granny, my grandpa, my uncle, my auntie. Because if they don't, they can get a secondary bacterial infection called pneumonia. Pneumonia leads to bedriddenness, but it's also caused by being bedridden. The other thing is, I love this one. Well, doc, I came to see you because they said when I went to the hospital, they looked on the x-ray and I have bronchitis. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot see bronchitis on an x-ray. Did you hear what I just said? Every doctor, whatever medical professional has told you, yep, I see it right here. You've got bronchitis. They lie. No radiologist will tell you you can see bronchitis on an x-ray. What you can see is pneumonia. They just told you that so that you would believe that you're getting your money's worth. The other thing is, man, doc, I've been coughing up some stuff that was yellow, green, and now brown. I want me another antibiotic. Ladies and gentlemen, the color of the sputum tells you nothing about the grade of the infection. The color of the sputum just tells you where it came from in your respiratory tract. So if the sputum comes from your mouth, it's a white color. If the sputum comes a little further down in the throat, it's a yellow color. It goes a little further down, it's a green color. If it's black, it means that it came from deep down in the lungs. Only if it is red, like flowing blood, now you have a problem. But every other color of sputum before that has nothing to do with what has infected you. It's where the sputum is coming from. Now, let me tell you something that will blow you away. If your sputum is coming up colorful, it means that your defense mechanisms are working. That's what it's supposed to do. So it should be when you come and tell the doctor, well, my sputum is green. He should say, good job. Continue to drink your water and get your air and get out and get moving so that you can knock this thing out. Not to sit in a bed 5 days. By the way, now it's recommended if you're sick, 2 days and back to activity. That when your immune system is working, the sputum indicates that your body's getting rid of it. The other thing we need to be careful of is antibiotic resistance. This is very scary. Cipro is a big gun antibiotic. Look at the explosion of resistant organisms to Cipro. Cipro works at the genetic level of the bacteria. That means, let me tell you how Cipro works. Cipro makes the bacteria sterile so they can't reproduce. But the bacteria are now resistant to Cipro. That means that when you take in the antibiotic that's supposed to make the bacteria not reproduce, the bacteria say, what you trying to do, boy? You said this for me? Let me present you to my kids. Here's Staphylococcus aureus, here's Streptococcus pneumoniae, here's all my children. That's what bacterial resistance means. And you know why we've become developing antibiotic resistance? Because we're not getting enough oxygen, we're not drinking enough water to produce peroxide, and peroxide is actually more powerful against these bacteria than even antibiotics. Now wait, hold up, I just inspired somebody who wants to go on a campaign, start a nonprofit, start a church. I will not take antibiotics. And we'll write a book about the sins of antibiotics. I'm not telling you don't take the antibiotics. I'm saying take them responsibly. If you take one course of antibiotics, and unless you have proof that there was actually an organism that the antibiotic did not treat, do not pressure your medical practitioner who just wants to get you out of their office to switch you to another antibiotic which has a different name doing the same thing. Here is what you need to do. Instead of complaining, drink more water, get some fresh air, and get your peroxide to help you get rid of the thing. Okay. Oxymoron number 2. I'm coughing up some nasty stuff. For the past 2 weeks, I need a cough suppressant. Ladies and gentlemen, when you have a natural cough, bringing up stuff, don't ask for something to stop the cough. What you're basically doing is putting a lid on a boiling pot of water. If you're coughing up stuff, it's because your lungs know it's not supposed to be there. And here's what I see most of my colleagues doing. To get rid of you, they give you something to stop the cough and help you sleep. And what you don't know is, while you're sleeping, the body fends off the organism more than while you're awake. When you're coughing up stuff, it's because the body knows it needs to get rid of it. So when you ask for a cough suppressant because you have a productive cough, that is not a proper way to fight off an upper respiratory infection. What you need is something to get that stuff out. And guess what the best thing is to help you get that stuff out? A steam shower. Do what Granny used to do on top of whatever the doctor tells you to do. Take your head with a towel and put it over a pot of steam and inhale. Remember there was that film, Waiting to Exhale? This is one that you want to inhale. Okay. Cough suppressant should only be used for 1 to 2 days maximum, and then you stop. If you have a cough that goes beyond 2 days and it's dry, you need to see your doctor, and here's why. If it's a child that has a dry cough, this is why I tell you, do not let anybody give you a cough suppressant for a productive cough. But when it's a dry cough and it goes beyond 2 days and it's a child, that typically is asthma. Now, I got to explain something about this because I have some interesting discussions with some of my friends. I have this friend, her son has asthma, right? And it's genetic. I can see it. He has skin infection, the whole thing. But then she found this website that said every disease is produced by the way you eat. So here's what she did. She took away the son's inhalers and made the kid subscribe to this eating lifestyle. Every time the kid has an asthma attack, she said, nah, it's because you're eating this. Nah, it's because you're eating that. And I kept telling her, no, because of sin, the kid has asthma. He needs to walk around with his inhaler. But she, decided, no, it must be what he's eating. This past Thanksgiving, the kid ended up in the hospital. He had a major asthma attack and almost died. I know a pastor that some doctors telling him the same foolishness. You know what? If you just eat right, pastor, your asthma will go away. This pastor's preaching and coughing. And the Lord has said, I'm like, are you Baptist? Or folks, sin has made us more prone to disease. If a child has a dry cough, it's not because of the way the child's eating. The kid has asthma. Have him carry around his inhaler. If you have asthma, more than likely you will not outgrow it. You have it for life. If a child has a dry cough more than 2 days and he's on a cough suppressant, more than likely it's asthma. Yes. Okay. All right, let me wind up and then we can continue this after the service. The last thing I'll tell you, if it's an older person with a dry cough, they have congestive heart failure. And if you give them a coughing medication, they can actually drown in their own body fluid. So, folks, we have another presentation this afternoon. We'll have time for if you have any questions, any concerns. But here's the thing I want you to leave with in mind, if you don't remember anything else. Number one, we need water regularly throughout the day, and we need oxygen regularly throughout the day because the combination of those two produce what? Peroxide in our lungs, which helps defend against deadly organisms. Say hello to my 3 little friends: water, oxygen, and chloride. God bless you.
We're going to